Hello, everyone. My name is Derion COF. I'm sorry for being a little bit out of breath. So today I'm going to be talking about overpopulation within the U.S. Specifically, I'll be going over how overpopulation in the U.S. is detrimental to the quality of life. Sorry. I will provide provide information on how overpopulation increases the cost of housing, both renting and buying, in the U.S. And finally, I will show how overpopulation affects the environment within the U.S. That's okay. So, the first point that I want to address is how overpopulation increases the cost of housing within the U.S. For this first point, I'll be looking specifically at the current housing situation in California. Both for renting and buying, prices for housing in California are more expensive than compared to other states in the U.S. Okay. And for example, in El Paso, Texas, rent for a one-bedroom house costs around $679, while one bedroom rent in San Diego, California costs around $1,571. Now, for buying a house, let's look at Pomona. Now, according to Zillow in Pomona, for $100,000, you could get a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house that's roughly 1,600 square feet. In Ohio, you could buy a similar house, if not better, for $15,000 up to $16,000, with up to maybe 1,900 to 2,000 square feet. So obviously, there's more space, more room, and the quality of the houses are similar, if not even better. I found maybe $30,000 in Ohio will get you around at like a nice house compared here in Cali, which is average, but I guess more expensive. On top of that, there's also a 20% down payment when buying a house. And so even to get that $100,000 house, you would need to give $20,000 up front to pay the down payment. So clearly it's a little bit difficult. There's a big gap in between for different states. Of course, the reason for that is demand. There's a lot of demand for housing in California due to overpopulation from births and migrations to the state. Obviously, California, very attractive. They have a bunch of attractive cities that attract a lot of visitors as well, and definitely a bunch of tourists and people who actually want to live in California as well. So of course, a lot of people coming to California are looking for places to stay. That increases the price for both renting and buying because there's a lot of demand for the housing, and so therefore, overpopulation, with a lot of people coming in, a lot of people would be demanding to look at these houses, like they would want to buy a house or whether they want to rent a house. That demand for those houses goes up, and because in California there's a lot of limitations, especially with how much to build. There's already houses already built, and because there's a demand for that, not a lot of houses are readily available to rent. And most of California already, there's a lot of housing, so a lot of people can't come in and try. Okay, well, I'll try to build my own house, because even then, if they try to do that, they would have to buy land, which is already more expensive because that land, since it's already a lot of people are demanding for housing, that land would be more expensive, and so really there isn't no other way to go around. It just increases in general. Therefore, overpopulation is one of the main causes, and for the increase in the price for housing due to demand. Now, moving on to the final issue, I would like to address how overpopulation affects the environment within the U.S. Of course, starting with agriculture. The percentage of land reserved for agriculture in the U.S. has declined greatly due to residential development. As I stated previously, the United States Department of Agriculture states that in 1949, about 63% of the U.S. land was used for agriculture, but that has since declined. I found a similar one for 2015 that stated that the U.S. used around 44.4% of its land for agriculture, with population growth contributing to the annual loss of more than 3 million acres of farmland. So each year, less and less of our land is being dedicated to food production and more towards housing. But like I said earlier, in California, there's a limit to how much you can build, so that we could still have some land dedicated for agriculture. Now, another problem becomes is deforestation. Since the founding of the U.S., the total forest cover has declined by a third. The U.S. Forest Service states that only 7% of the U.S. Original old growth forests remain. So only 7% of what we originally had is now available. This loss in forest contributes to climate change and also destroys the habitats for millions of species. So in conclusion, overpopulation not only raises the prices for houses for rent and for sale, but also limits our agriculture and destroys habitats for many animals. Thank you. I'm sorry for the panting in between.
It's okay, don't worry about it.
And so is it okay if maybe next class I could bring in the...
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. Okay, well, the proposition's clearly identified. You've got two secondary issues that you're going to develop. The whole first point, though, is all really about housing costs and availability in California. So the focus needs to be on overpopulation of the United States. That seemed to be the topic that you were starting with. And all of your examples in other places seem to undermine this notion. It's not overpopulation, it's not that we have too much people, it's that we have too much desire for this particular environment or location that's going on. Now, if you narrowed your claim to just the problems of California with overpopulation, I think that that would be applicable. But this whole second point isn't talking just about California, it's talking about nationwide. And so you can't have, you know, the first point be just about California, the second point be about the whole nation, and argue that overpopulation is the source of both of these problems. You got to be consistent in that, and that seems to be, like I said, an issue that, you know, the response speaker is probably going to be addressing that availability of housing in other places. I mean, you yourself showed that housing can be available at affordable prices in a lot of other places. That people want to live here is not related to how many people there are, but rather, you know, our weather or our opportunities or, you know, whatever it is that we have here that's so darn great. It's the weather. That's it. You know, because it sure ain't the taxes. All right. You've got some good examples on that first point. There was a little inconsistency. I'm going $15,000 to $16,000 for a house in Ohio. Maybe. I'm not saying that that's not true, but I have friends who just bought a house in Ohio, and they were not looking at a $16,000 house. Yeah, you probably had, like I said, I think there's some issue with the numbers that are going on here, and you've maybe conflated some numbers. The idea that there is a substantial difference, you do make that point. I just think that you want to be careful that you get the numbers right, because that undermines your credibility if it sounds, you know, if it's strained. And by the way, a $100,000 house in California, good luck on that one. You know, that sounds like a mobile home in Lancaster, if you're lucky. You know, so you got to be a little bit careful about the information. It may need to be updated. You might be looking at some older information there. The agricultural information I thought was more straightforward. You had a percentage of the land area that's gone down. You know, that's being devoted to that. However, you don't show that there's any particular problem. We don't see any information that suggests that we have less agriculture available, less activity, people are not being fed as well. It sounds like we've simply gotten more efficient. Now, you do kind of go off onto a couple of tangents about the forests and about climate change right at the end. I think that probably isn't immediately relevant to your argument on this particular point. So stick with the agricultural issue, but also develop some consequence to the change in the amount of land that is devoted to agriculture. Because I'm wondering, well, why is it bad? If we're producing more food with less land area, that doesn't sound like it's a problem. And is the less land area primarily because we've had expanded population? That I think you need a little bit better evidence on. All right, thank you.